The winter sky hung heavy over Osaka on the morning of December 3, 1944. Warrant Officer Hiroshi Tanaka stood in the observation post at the Daihatsu ordnance works, binoculars pressed against his face, scanning the southern horizon. The air smelled of machine oil and the charcoal fires burning in barrel stoves scattered across the factory yard. He'd been stationed here for 8 months, watching, waiting, preparing for an attack that military intelligence insisted would come eventually. But not like this, not with the precision everyone feared. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. The Americans had bombed the home islands before. In June, their new superfortress bombers had struck Yawata from bases in China, 75 of them, droning through the darkness. They dropped their loads from 20,000 feet, maybe higher. Most of the bombs fell wide. The Imperial iron and steel works suffered minimal damage. A few warehouses burned. Some craters in empty fields, nothing that couldn't be repaired in days. Tanaka remembered the briefing after that raid. The intelligence officer had been almost dismissive. Their accuracy is poor, he'd said, tapping his pointer against a map studded with red marks showing where bombs had actually fallen. At that altitude, in darkness, with our fighters harassing them, they cannot hit what they aim for. This is not dive bombing, this is desperation. But something had changed in November. The Americans had seized islands in the Marianas, Saipan, Tinian, Guam. Tanaka had studied the maps. Those islands sat 1,500 miles from Tokyo, well within range of the B-29. And now the Americans were building massive air bases there, not forward staging points, permanent installations with concrete runways that could handle hundreds of bombers. The first raid from the Marianas had come on November 24th. 111 superfortresses targeting the Musashi aircraft plant outside Tokyo. Tanaka had read the damage assessment reports. Only 24 bombers hit the primary target. The rest scattered their loads across port facilities and residential areas. The jet stream, Tokyo reported. Winds at altitude exceeding 200 miles per hour. The bombs were blown miles off course before they reached the ground. Military headquarters in Tokyo had issued new guidance. American high-altitude bombing was a nuisance, not a mortal threat. Yes, the B-29s could reach Japan. Yes, they would come in increasing numbers. But they could not bomb with sufficient accuracy to cripple war production. Japanese factories would disperse into smaller workshops. Residential neighborhoods would house crucial manufacturing. The Americans would have to choose, bomb indiscriminately and waste ordnance on civilian housing, or attempt precision strikes that rarely hit their marks. Tanaka wanted to believe it. He'd seen what dive bombers could do. The Navy's Aichi D-3A Val could put a bomb through a destroyer's deck from 3,000 feet. But those aircraft carried a single 250-kilogram bomb and had to descend into the teeth of anti-aircraft fire to deliver it. The B-29 carried 4 tons of ordnance and flew at altitudes where Japanese fighters struggled to intercept. Quantity versus quality, mass versus precision. The Americans claimed they had solved the precision problem. Tanaka had first heard about it in September, during a briefing at regional headquarters in Kobe. A technical officer from Naval Intelligence stood before a room of factory defense commanders and air defense coordinators, his expression grave. "The Americans have developed a bombsight," he said, pulling a cloth cover from a diagram mounted on an easel. "They call it the Norden. It is an electromechanical computing device coupled to an autopilot system. According to intelligence gathered from neutral observers before the war, this device can calculate trajectory adjustments in real time, accounting for altitude, airspeed, wind drift, and target movement." Someone in the back row laughed. "At 20,000 feet? Impossible." The intelligence officer didn't smile. "The Americans have been testing this device since the mid-1930s. Their propaganda claims a bombardier can place a bomb inside a pickle barrel from 20,000 feet. This is obvious exaggeration, but our analysis suggests accuracy within 100 meters is achievable under ideal conditions. 100 meters. Tanaka had done the mathematics later, lying awake in his quarters. A bomb within 100 meters of its aim point could destroy any building in a factory complex, could crater a runway, could sever a rail line. If the Americans could actually achieve that accuracy, consistently, from outside the effective range of most anti-aircraft guns, the intelligence officer had continued. However, we assess several limiting factors. The device requires stable flight conditions for several minutes before bomb release. Our fighters can disrupt this. The device requires clear visual identification of the target. Cloud cover will defeat it. And the device is extremely complex. It will malfunction. American crews will make errors in operation. That briefing had been in September, now it was December. And Tanaka had spent the intervening months watching American reconnaissance aircraft chart every major factory, every rail yard, every port facility along the southern coast of Honshu. The reconnaissance planes flew too high and too fast for interception. They photographed everything, measuring, mapping, preparing target folders. His binoculars swept across the factory yard below. The Daihatsu works manufactured aircraft components, propeller assemblies primarily, along with landing gear struts and engine cowlings for the Navy's Nakajima Ki-43 fighter. Not a large facility by Tokyo standards, maybe 300 workers on the day shift, but crucial. The Navy's fighter production depended on dozens of facilities like this one, each contributing specialized components that fed the final assembly plants in Nagoya and Tokyo. Dispersed production, they called it. The strategy that would defeat American bombing. You couldn't cripple Japanese aircraft production by hitting one or two massive factories. You'd have to find and destroy hundreds of small workshops scattered across the home islands. Impossible, except the Americans kept making maps. Movement caught his eye. A runner from the communications section, sprinting across the yard, his boots kicking up frost from the packed earth. Tanaka lowered his binoculars and turned as the young private reached the observation post's ladder. "Sir." The private saluted, breathless. "Alert from Regional Air Defense. Enemy aircraft detected south of Kyushu. High altitude, course northeast. Estimated time to Osaka, 45 minutes. Tanaka checked his watch. 0830. He turned and reached for the hand crank siren mounted on the post's railing. 3 long cranks. The factory's air raid alert. Below, workers began streaming toward the concrete shelters built into the hillside behind the main assembly building. "How many aircraft?" Tanaka asked. "The report said 13, sir. B-29s. 13. A small formation, probably a reconnaissance mission with a few bombers attached, or perhaps a nuisance raid to keep the air defenses active. Osaka had been hit twice in November, both times by small formations that dropped incendiaries on residential districts. Harassment, psychological warfare. Tanaka descended the ladder and walked quickly to the factory's command post, a reinforced concrete bunker half buried in the hillside. Inside, the factory manager and his senior staff were already gathering around the radio set, listening to updates from the civilian air defense network. "They're maintaining course," someone said. "Altitude estimated at 23,000 feet. No fighter escort detected." No escort. That made sense. The Americans didn't have fighters with the range to accompany bombers from the Marianas. The B-29s flew alone, depending on altitude and defensive armament for survival. Tanaka had studied the intelligence reports on the superfortress. 12 50 caliber machine guns in remote-controlled turrets, a formidable defensive array. But Japanese fighters had learned to attack from below and behind, exploiting blind spots in the defensive fire. 13 bombers. Maybe they'd lose 2 or 3 to fighters, maybe 1 more to anti-aircraft fire. The rest would drop their bombs from high altitude and turn for home. Most of those bombs would miss by hundreds of meters. A few craters in the factory yard, perhaps. Some broken windows. Production would resume the next morning. The radio crackled. "All stations, this is regional air defense. Enemy formation has divided. 7 aircraft continuing toward Osaka, 6 aircraft breaking southeast toward Kobe." Tanaka frowned. A split formation. That was unusual. perhaps targeting multiple cities to spread the defensive response. 7 bombers carried maybe 30 tons of ordnance between them, not enough to flatten. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. A factory complex, not enough to shut down production for more than a day or two, unless they could actually hit what they aimed at. The minutes crawled past, 0900, 0915. The radio reported Japanese fighters engaging the Kobe formation. 2 bombers damaged, 1 possibly destroyed. No report yet on the Osaka group. At 0920, the factory manager's phone rang. He answered, listened, then looked at Tanaka. Air Defense reports the enemy aircraft are beginning their bombing run. Estimated time to bomb release, 3 minutes. Tanaka moved to the bunker's observation slit, a narrow opening in the concrete that faced south. The sky was a pale winter blue, scattered with high cirrus clouds. Perfect visibility. No weather to hide behind. No wind to blow bombs off course. Perfect conditions for the Norden Bombsight, if it actually worked. The sound came first, a deep, rhythmic drone that seemed to vibrate through the ground itself. Then he saw them. 7 silver shapes in perfect formation, flying southeast to northwest, so high they looked like toys. Contrails streamed behind each aircraft, white lines scratched across the blue. They were flying straight, level, no evasive maneuvers. Flying like they owned the sky. The anti-aircraft batteries opened up. Black puffs of smoke burst below and behind the formation, hopelessly out of range. Tanaka watched the bombers continue, unwavering, following whatever path their computing machines and autopilots had calculated. He thought about the pickle barrel, the propaganda claim, 20,000 feet, inside a barrel. Sir, someone said behind him. They're directly overhead. Tanaka pressed his face closer to the observation slit. The lead bomber was perhaps 5 degrees past vertical now, continuing its straight run. Any second they would release. He saw it. Tiny black specks separating from the aircraft, falling, accelerating. Not a random dump, a calculated release. Bombs from all 7 aircraft dropping in sequence, spaced precisely, creating a pattern. 20,000 feet takes a bomb roughly 45 seconds to fall. 45 seconds to be blown off course by wind, to drift with its own ballistic imperfections, to miss its target by hundreds of meters. Unless someone had built a machine that could calculate all those variables. Account for them, correct for them. Tanaka counted. 1001, 1002. The first explosion came at 1038. Not in the factory yard, not in the open field beyond, not in the residential neighborhood half a kilometer away. The bomb struck the southwest corner of the main assembly building, dead center. The building erupted in a geyser of smoke and debris. 1039, 1040, 1041. The second bomb hit the machine shop. The third destroyed the power substation. The fourth obliterated the propeller finishing workshop. The 5th and 6th walked through the storage warehouses. The 7th cratered the factory's internal rail spur. 7 bombs, 7 targets, all hit. From 20,000 feet, the silence that followed felt absolute. Then the secondary explosions began. Fuel storage, compressed gas cylinders, ammunition stores for the anti-aircraft guns. Tanaka stood frozen at the observation slit, watching the Daihatsu works burn. His factory, his responsibility, his illusion. Someone was speaking beside him. The factory manager, his voice hollow. How? How did they do that? Tanaka didn't answer. He was thinking about dispersed production, about hundreds of small workshops scattered across the home islands, about maps, about reconnaissance photographs, about a computing machine that could put a bomb inside a pickle barrel. And he was thinking about what came next. Because if the Americans could do this to one factory, they could do it to 100, to 1,000. They could systematically erase Japanese industry one precision strike at a time, unless the intelligence reports were wrong. Unless this was luck. unless the Norden Bombsight didn't actually work as advertised. But Tanaka had seen 7 bombs hit 7 targets, and he knew, with the cold certainty of mathematics, that luck didn't follow a pattern. The ruins of the Daihatsu works smouldered for 3 days. Tanaka spent those days sifting through rubble, counting bodies, writing reports. 23 workers dead, 47 injured. Production capacity reduced by an estimated 70%. The propeller finishing workshop completely destroyed. The machine shop structurally unsound, condemned. 3 months to rebuild, minimum, probably longer. But the numbers that haunted him were different. 7 bombers, 7 direct hits, 100% accuracy. Regional headquarters in Kobe sent investigators. They arrived on the 4th day in a staff car, 2 lieutenant colonels, and a major from the technical intelligence section. They wore clean uniforms and carried leather portfolios. They smelled of cigarette smoke and the kind of confidence that came from working far behind the lines. Tanaka led them through the wreckage. They took photographs, made measurements, examined the bomb craters with surveyor's tools, calculating angles and trajectories. The senior investigator, a lieutenant colonel named Shimada, kept shaking his head. The distribution pattern, Shimada said, kneeling beside the crater where the main assembly building had stood. It's too precise. Sequential release, timed to the microsecond. And look at this. He pointed to the crater's edge. The impact angle, perfectly vertical, no drift, no deviation. The Norden Bombsight, Tanaka said quietly. Shimada stood, brushing dust from his knees. Possibly, but we've analyzed other raids. Tokyo, Nagoya, even the attacks here in November. The accuracy was nowhere near this level. Most bombs fell hundreds of meters from their targets. Weather, the major suggested. December 3rd was perfect visibility. No clouds, minimal wind. Even so, Shimada pulled a notebook from his portfolio. We've studied American bombing in Europe. The 8th Air Force has been operating since 1942. They use the same bomb sites, the same tactics. Under ideal conditions, they achieve approximately 30% of bombs within 300 meters of the aim point. Under combat conditions, it's worse. Much worse. Tanaka felt something loosen in his chest. 30%, not 100%. Then this was an anomaly, he said. A statistical outlier. Shimada didn't answer immediately. He walked to the edge of what had been the propeller workshop, studying the destruction. When he spoke, his voice was careful. I don't know what this was, Warrant Officer. What I do know is that Naval Intelligence has been tracking B-29 operations since November. We've documented 43 separate raids against targets across the home islands. Of those 43 raids, exactly 1 achieved this level of accuracy. This one. The Major opened his own notebook. The raid on November 24th, Tokyo. Musashino Aircraft Plant. 111 bombers dispatched. Only 24 hit the primary target. Average bombing error, 400 meters. December 3rd, Nagoya. Mitsubishi Engine Plant. 61 bombers. 32 hit the target area. Average error, 250 meters. December 13th. Also Nagoya. 54 bombers. Heavy cloud cover forced radar bombing. Only 7 bombs hit within 500 meters of the aim point. Shimada closed his notebook. And then there's December 3rd here in Osaka. 7 bombers, 7 direct hits. Average error. He paused. Approximately 5 meters. 5 meters. Tanaka remembered the propaganda claim. A pickle barrel from 20,000 feet. So, what happened? Tanaka asked. Why was this raid different? That's what we're trying to determine. Shimada lit a cigarette, his hands steady. Several possibilities. First, these could have been their most experienced crews, hand-picked for a demonstration raid. Show the Japanese what the Norden can do under perfect conditions. Second possibility, the Major continued, pure chance. 7 bombs, 7 hits. Statistically unlikely, but not impossible. Like rolling 7 successful dice. Third possibility. Shimada exhaled smoke. They've improved the device, made modifications based on combat experience, if they can consistently achieve this accuracy. He didn't finish the sentence. They stood in silence, watching smoke drift from the ruins. That evening, back in his quarters, Tanaka drafted his report. He chose his words carefully, knowing they would be read by men who desperately wanted to believe that dispersed production could save Japanese industry. Men who needed to believe that American technology had limits. He wrote about the perfect weather, the lack of fighter opposition, the probable selection of elite crews. He suggested, diplomatically, that the raid might have been designed for propaganda purposes rather than operational effectiveness. Then he wrote a second report. This one he kept locked in his desk. In this version, he did the mathematics. If the Americans could achieve 5-meter accuracy under ideal conditions, what was their practical accuracy under normal combat conditions? Assume cloud cover 50% of the time. Assume fighter opposition. Assume crew fatigue, equipment malfunction, all the variables that degraded performance. Even if their average accuracy dropped to 300 meters, 10 times worse than what he'd witnessed, they could still hit factory-sized targets, still destroy railways, still crater airfields, and they were building more bases in the Marianas, training more crews, manufacturing more aircraft. American industrial capacity dwarfed Japan's. Everyone knew it, though few spoke it aloud. The United States produced more aircraft in 1 month than Japan produced in a year. What happened when those aircraft arrived? What happened when, instead of 7 bombers, 100 came, or 300, or 1,000? Tanaka pulled out casualty figures from European bombing campaigns. The British Royal Air Force had been bombing Germany since 1940, initially at night, targeting cities, achieving abysmal accuracy. Then the Americans joined with their daylight precision bombing doctrine and their Norden bombsights. The results were mixed, sometimes brilliant, sometimes disastrous, but always, the volume increased. More bombers, more sorties, more tonnage. Hamburg, July 1943, 8 days of firebombing, 40,000 dead, perhaps more. An entire city transformed into an inferno by incendiary bombs that didn't need precision, they just needed volume. Dresden, February 1945. Still ongoing as Tanaka wrote this. Initial reports suggested 25,000 casualties, but the numbers kept rising. He studied a map of Japan. The home islands measured approximately 368,000 square kilometers. The population exceeded 70 million, most concentrated in cities along the coast: Tokyo, Osaka, Nagoya, Kobe, Yokohama. Cities built of wood and paper, cities that would burn. A knock interrupted his thoughts. The factory manager stood in the doorway, looking older than he had a week ago. "The insurance adjusters came today," he said. "They're classifying the damage as an act of war, no payout. The Navy says they'll allocate funds for reconstruction, but it will take months to process the paperwork. Meanwhile, I have workers with no wages and no work. Half of them have already left for the countryside." Tanaka gestured to a chair. The manager sat heavily. "I keep thinking about those bombs," the manager said. "How they walked right through the factory, like someone was checking off a list. Assembly building, check. Machine shop, check. Power station, check. It wasn't random, it was systematic." "They had reconnaissance photographs," Tanaka said. "They knew exactly what they were hitting. But how did they hit it? From so high? Through all that sky?" The manager's hands trembled slightly. "I fought in China. I've seen what dive bombers can do. But this was different. This was like they were standing right here, pointing at buildings, saying, 'Destroy this one. Now destroy this one.'" "How do they do that?" Tanaka could have explained about the Norden Bombsight, about gyroscopes and mechanical computers and autopilot systems, about how the device measured ground speed and calculated wind drift and adjusted for altitude and temperature and a dozen other variables, about how an experienced bombardier could, theoretically, achieve extraordinary accuracy under optimal conditions. But he remembered Shimada's statistics: 43 raids. Only one achieved this level of precision. "I don't know," Tanaka said honestly. "Maybe we witnessed something exceptional. Maybe it was their best cruise on their best day. Maybe it won't happen again." The manager nodded slowly, but his expression suggested he didn't believe it. That he'd seen the future, and the future was 7 bombs falling in perfect sequence. After the manager left, Tanaka returned to his map. He began marking factories, small workshops, the dispersed production facilities that supposedly made Japan's industrial capacity invulnerable to strategic bombing. Propeller plants in Osaka, engine shops in Nagoya, electronics facilities in Tokyo, landing gear manufacturers in Kobe, dozens of them, hundreds, each one a potential target for American precision. But precision was expensive. It required perfect weather, experienced crews, functioning equipment. The Americans couldn't maintain that standard for every raid, could they? He pulled out more intelligence reports. These were older, from before the Marianas fell. Analysis of American training procedures. The Norden Bombsight required extensive instruction. A bombardier needed months of training to operate it effectively. The device itself was classified at the highest level. Guards protected it before and after every mission. If an aircraft went down, the bombardier was supposed to destroy the site rather than let it fall into enemy hands. The Americans treated the Norden like a sacred object, like the key to victory. What if they were right? Tanaka remembered a lecture from years ago, before the war. An engineering professor discussing the nature of technological advantage. Any sufficiently advanced technology, the professor had said, appears indistinguishable from magic to those who don't understand it. But it's not magic, it's mathematics, and mathematics doesn't lie. 7 bombs, 7 targets. The mathematics didn't lie. January brought new raids, Nagoya on the 3rd, targeting the Mitsubishi aircraft plant. 57 bombers, weather poor. Results mixed. Maybe 40% of bombs within 500 meters of the aim point. Kobe on the 9th, Kawasaki shipyards. 72 bombers, clear weather, better results. Approximately 50% accuracy. Tokyo on the 19th, Nakajima Aircraft Works. 99 bombers, fighter opposition heavy. 2 bombers shot down. Accuracy degraded significantly. Tanaka tracked every raid, plotted every result. He built a chart showing bombing accuracy against weather conditions, fighter opposition, target type, and time of day. Patterns emerged. Clear weather. Accuracy improved dramatically. Fighter opposition. Accuracy decreased proportionally to intensity of combat. Target familiarity. Accuracy improved on targets that had been hit before, suggesting crews were learning. And most interesting, accuracy was improving over time, not dramatically, not consistently. But the trend line pointed upward. The Americans were getting better. In mid-January, Shimada returned to Osaka. This time he came alone, driving himself in a small military sedan. He found Tanaka in the factory ruins, supervising the reconstruction of the power substation. "Walk with me," Shimada said. They moved away from the workers, toward the hillside where Tanaka's observation post had stood. The post itself had been damaged by blast effects from the bombing. Someone had repaired the ladder, but the structure leaned at an unsettling angle. "I've been to Tokyo," Shimada said. "Naval Intelligence Headquarters. They've formed a special section to analyze American bombing. I'm part of it now." "Congratulations," Tanaka said, unsure if that was the appropriate response. "It's not a promotion. It's a burial detail." Shimada pulled out his cigarettes, offered one to Tanaka. Both men lit up. "We're documenting the death of Japanese industry. That's what it amounts to." "That bad?" "Worse than anyone will admit publicly." Shimada exhaled smoke. The Americans flew 49 missions from the Marianas between November 24th and January 31st. They dropped approximately 7,000 tons of ordnance. The accuracy varies wildly from abysmal to extraordinary, but the trend is clear. They're learning, refining their procedures, improving their results. What does headquarters want you to do? Find a countermeasure, find their weakness, find some way to make the Norden Bombsight ineffective. As if we could reach into their cockpits and break their equipment. They smoked in silence, watching workers clear rubble below. You know what's ironic? Shimada said finally. The Norden Bombsight doesn't actually work as advertised. We've studied captured documents, talked to intelligence sources in neutral countries. The device has a theoretical accuracy of 75 feet from 20,000 feet altitude under laboratory conditions, with perfect calibration, no wind, no combat stress. But in combat, it achieves maybe 1,200 feet average accuracy, sometimes better, often worse. The Americans themselves admit this. Their own bombing surveys show that only 30 to 40% of bombs land within 1,000 feet of the aim point under operational conditions. Tanaka thought about December 3rd. 5 meters. So what did I witness? He asked. If the device doesn't work that well, how did they hit everything? Shimada crushed his cigarette under his boot. Luck. Skill. Perfect conditions. The alignment of every variable in their favor. Pick your explanation. What matters is that they don't need to achieve that accuracy consistently. They just need to achieve it occasionally. Because they have unlimited bombers. Unlimited bombs. They can afford to waste 90% of their ordnance if the other 10% hits critical targets. He pulled a folded paper from his jacket. This is the real problem. American production figures, preliminary estimates from our embassy sources in Switzerland. Tanaka unfolded the paper. The numbers made his stomach drop. Boeing B-29 production, approximately 350 per month and increasing. Total projected B-29 strength by December 1945, potentially 3,000 aircraft. Bomb production capacity, essentially unlimited. 3,000, Tanaka said quietly. They could put 1,000 bombers over Tokyo in a single day. They could put 1,000 bombers over Tokyo every day for a week, and the next week, and the month after that. Shimada took the paper back. The Norden Bombsight is not the weapon. The weapon is American industrial capacity. The Norden just makes that capacity more efficient. So what do? We. Shimada smiled without humor. We write reports. We document the bombing. We analyze the patterns. We tell headquarters that dispersed production is working, that Japanese industry is resilient, that we can outlast the American campaign. We tell them what they need to hear to continue the war. And the truth? The truth is that unless something changes dramatically, Japan will be bombed into submission by the end of 1945, maybe sooner. The only question is how many people die before that happens. Shimada walked back to his car. Before he drove away, he leaned out the window. Your report from December, the one you actually filed, it was good, diplomatic, hopeful. You should write more reports like that. And the other report? The one with the real analysis? Burn it, Shimada said, unless you want to be transferred to a rifle company on Okinawa. He drove away, leaving Tanaka standing in the shadow of his damaged observation post. That night, Tanaka did burn his private report. He watched the pages curl and blacken in the stove in his quarters, thinking about numbers. 7 bombs from 7 aircraft achieving perfect accuracy, versus 49 missions achieving 30% accuracy across thousands of tons of ordnance. Both were true, both were real. One was a demonstration of theoretical capability. The other was the grinding reality of industrial warfare. And in the end, industrial warfare didn't require precision, it just required volume. Enough bombs that even 30% accuracy meant certain destruction. February brought new tactics. the Americans stopped coming at high altitude in daylight. Instead, they came at night, flying low, carrying something different: incendiaries. The first firebombing hit Kobe on February 4th. 69 bombers carrying M69 incendiary clusters. Each cluster held 47 bomblets filled with jellied gasoline. The bombers came in at 7,000 feet. No need for the Norden Bombsight at that altitude, no need for precision. Kobe burned. Tanaka watched the glow from 30 kilometers away, a false dawn that lit the southern sky for hours. By morning, 2,300 people were dead, over 1 million square meters of the city destroyed. 3 weeks later, they hit Tokyo. Not the Nakajima plant or the Musashino factory. They hit the Shitamachi district, working-class neighborhoods, wooden houses, paper walls. 334 bombers dropping 1,665 tons of incendiaries. 100,000 dead, maybe more. The fire was so hot it created its own weather system, a vortex of superheated air that sucked oxygen from bomb shelters and suffocated people underground. The Norden Bombsight, Tanaka learned, had 2 settings, one for precision, one for area effect. The Americans had stopped trying to hit pickle barrels. Now they were burning cities. The Strategic Bombing Survey would later determine that these incendiary raids were more effective than any precision bombing could have been, that Japan's cottage industry structure, the dispersed production that was supposed to save the economy, made it uniquely vulnerable to firebombing. That, destroying the workers' homes, destroyed the workforce. That destroying the workforce destroyed production more effectively than bombing the factories themselves. But in February 1945, Tanaka didn't know any of that. He only knew that the rules had changed, that the Americans had demonstrated they could hit a target with extraordinary precision when they wanted to, and when precision wasn't required, they could burn entire cities. By March, Tanaka was no longer stationed in Osaka. The Daihatsu works never fully recovered. Production moved to underground facilities near Nagano. Tanaka was reassigned to civil defense coordination in Yokohama. He spent his days planning evacuation routes, organizing bucket brigades, teaching civilians how to create fire breaks by demolishing their own homes. All useless activities. All preparations for a catastrophe that could not be prevented. The Americans came to Yokohama on May 29th, 517 bombers, incendiaries. The city burned for 12 hours. Tanaka survived because he was in a concrete bunker built into a hillside. He emerged at dawn to find Yokohama transformed into a landscape of ash and twisted metal. The fires had been so intense that steel girders had melted. Concrete had cracked from thermal expansion. Bodies were charred beyond recognition. He walked through the ruins, remembering December 3rd. 7 bombs from 20,000 feet, each one hitting its target with mathematical precision. The demonstration of capability, the promise or threat of what American technology could achieve. Then he looked at the ash desert around him. The reality of what American technology had chosen to achieve instead. The pickle barrel had never been the point. The point was that they could hit a pickle barrel if they wanted to, or they could burn the entire warehouse district, their choice, their capability, their overwhelming, unstoppable advantage. Japan surrendered on August 15th. By then, 67 cities had been firebombed. The rail system was in ruins. The navy had ceased to exist. The army was trapped on the mainland and in Pacific Islands, cut off from supply. And 2 cities, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, had been erased by weapons that made the Norden Bombsight look like a child's toy. But Tanaka never forgot December 3rd, 1944. 7 bombs, 7 targets, 5 meters average accuracy. The day Japan learned that American precision bombing was real, and then learned that America didn't need precision. Volume would do just fine. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now, and don't forget to subscribe.